my profession hasn't changed much since you were in that situation. And in fact, it's probably even worse now because how old were you then?
I was 9.
At that age, you're highly likely of being taken into state care, particularly if you're Aboriginal, primarily. Secondly, from non-English speaking background. It's pretty bad.
We talked about this the other day. I didn't know that that
Mm.
was a possibility now that that existed, that, you mentioned you would have been taken out. Oh, just the thought of that made me freak out because, I mean, even though everything was tough, I always had this instinct that I had to be by my mum's side because, I mean, I was aware that we didn't have family over there. It was basically dad, mum, Ali, and I. And so if that had have happened, I mean, that probably would have just sent me overboard with my own
100%.
mental state, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that would have just freaked me out.
And the harm that is done by removing children is only just starting to be kind of recognised. The way the child protection system works, we have a family policing system where we have mandatory reporters, people like myself, who report to the child protection hotline. It gets investigated. You go through risk assessments, which you then get case planned against. And in those case plans, you usually set up to fail. And evidence has been collected all along the way. And as the evidence has been collected, the end point is removal. Like the idea is that child protection system come in and they swoop and they take the kids and they put them into homes that are supposed to be safer. Hashtag not all social workers, hashtag not all child protection workers, right? I just want to say that
Yeah.
there is some good work being done out there, but this is the way the system is designed, right? And so even some of the good workers can't, who can see what's wrong with it, still feel powerless, which is why we have such a high turnover of child protection workers in the state.
Well,
This like moral pain, this moral suffering, this sense of injustice, this sense of I thought I was coming here to do something and now we've taken this child and I don't know if I should have done that. So that's the way the system is designed, and that's the end point is foster care. But now there's a recognition that a lot of harm is done, and even it's more predictable that you're going to experience multiple forms of significant harm in out of home care. Not to mention the fact that you've been taken away from your family, your kin, your community, your culture, your identity, your friends, your community, like, your school, the street, all of that is just taken away.
I don't even want to think about that because in the end, I'm happy with the way that we struggled, but we struggled together, right? I mean,
100%.
it's a tough situation to be in, but you would 100% rather be there.
Look, and it's horrible to have to say this, but the chances of being physically and sexually and emotionally abused in foster care are pretty high. Like one woman said to me the other day, my mum did some really fucked up stuff, but I wasn't sexually abused until I was taken, you know. And parents know this, like a lot of parents know this. And I think what you said before about the struggle, how do we understand what the struggle is for families, understand how they're responding to the struggle in the best way they can, and how we can remove some of the barriers so they can continue in the struggle without as much struggle. You would not have wanted that childhood. You missed out on a lot growing up. But also, what would have made a difference, you
Yeah.
know? And were you asked that? Were you asked what would make a difference to
Back then, or
back
no?
then?
Absolutely not. And actually, you've tied it in perfectly to my next question, which is counseling and therapy mandatory now? Because, for example, as children, my brother and I, we weren't offered any type of emotional support. So I know that that would have made a massive difference in our home life, in understanding my mum in a different way. Like if somebody had have come in and said, hey, your mum has schizophrenia, and so these are the basic symptoms that she's going to be showing, that would have been easier. I mean, schizophrenia, obviously, there's a lot of auditory hallucinations. So what happened with my mum, and I always, I do these interviews, obviously, with the utmost respect toward my mum, because I
Mm,
don't,
yeah,
it's hard for me to talk about it
yeah,
because I
yeah.
don't want her to feel ashamed of,
No, yeah,
but I would listen to her talk alone. And that was bizarre for me as a child. So how do you wrap your head around that? Then the volatility. I mean, there's something that we all recognize when we have a family member with schizophrenia. There's a look that they get in their eyes. Their eyes just glaze over, and it's like they don't know you anymore. That is very classic in a schizophrenic patient. And so when I would see that in my mum, the way that she would look at me, I literally would shit my pants, Kim, because
Mm.
I was like, I don't know if I'm in danger. I don't know if she's going to hit me. I don't know if she doesn't recognize me anymore. Because, I take therapy now. This was an observation that I had, but she kind of backed me up on it. I said, I have not heard of any schizophrenic patient with positive hallucinations. I won $1 million and I've got to go to the bank and I've got to, get that money out. No, it's the devil's coming for me. The government's looking out for me. There are cameras all over my home. My children are trying to steal from me. They are stealing from me. This person wants to hurt me. And so when you're a kid and you're in that situation and you don't know and you have no information, there's no psychoeducation available. Oh God, I think counseling and therapy would have helped me too also, and not only for the information of what schizophrenia is, but my own processing of emotions. And
If I had been a counsellor with you in that situation, I probably would have been asking you what you know, what it is that you understand, what patterns you've observed, how do you respond, how does that work, how are you managing? Even nowadays, the understanding of schizophrenia is constantly changing in terms of our understanding. There isn't one universal understanding of what it is and what its etiology is. I think that every person is different. And also, what's interesting about the fear-based hallucinations, they're culturally situated. Depending on which religion you come from, which culture you come from, the way the fears are understood or manifest in terms of Allah or God or Jesus or the devil. I'm just thinking back to people who I've worked with before where you can understand to some degree where this comes from, what the cultural context of this is, how those fears draw upon certain dominant ideas in society, like, you're going to go to hell or like the devil. I find that interesting as well. I think the risk of only working with children and not as a family is that we run the risk of isolating people's experiences. So I'm not saying that it's not important for there to be a space for children to be able to share their experiences with a trusted therapist who actually listens and understands. But I think we also have to be mindful of not responsibilizing children in terms of being able to manage or be different or better as a result of counseling.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like they're not the ones that need to be fixed. Supported, yes. What does that look like for a child? What does that mean for a child? Does it mean that they just want to be able to go and kick a soccer ball with a mentor down at the park every Wednesday afternoon and look forward to that? What does it mean? What does a child want? That's going to take the edge off the intensity of the experience for them. Or do they want respite? Do they want someone to come in at certain times of the evening to support mum? What is it that they want? Because I think when we go just to counselling, we go to people's social and emotional well-being, but
mm,
we don't talk about what else is going to make a difference. So
right.
we have to be careful about the confines of the four walls when we're talking about counselling, because it can be too limiting if we don't look holistically at what other supports would make a difference.
Would counseling and therapy be mandatory today for kids? No.
No,
Oh, that's
no. Well, one, I don't think any therapeutic approach should be mandatory. It
mm,
should be something that people choose to do. And particularly when there's so many dodgy counselors out there, like, you got to be careful which one you get, right? Now we have mental health care plans. You can get 6 sessions with a accredited mental health social worker or psychologist or counselor. The problem with that, though, is that you require a provisional diagnosis from a GP. And then, then the provisional diagnosis is on your record. And then the stigma of having now. So say you're a child with a parent with a mental illness, and then you go to get a mental health care plan. Now you giving given a diagnosis. Now you're freaking out because now you're potentially, what does that mean? Do you know what I mean? Like the way we construct these referral processes is really, really has to be looked at.
Just now, when you mentioned dodgy counselors, the social worker, Sean, I always had this ick feeling with him because he would look at us like just very fixed.
Mm.
It was very undesirable, watching you like a hawk. Didn't feel very supportive, but and that's exactly how I felt toward him. Like, ooh, he's like dodgy. And then, how you feeling? Like, not good with
I
you.
can tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And he probably would have gone on to a different role where he would become a therapist. You know, like we do, we all do. We social workers can do so many different things, and so a lot of people often end up in a therapy role at some point in time.
He
And
would.
the challenge about that is that no one would know what he's like with someone in the room, right? And the therapy is such an isolating experience. And so you're in a room with an adult on your own who's writing notes about you, asking questions, either making you feel better or worse. They're the professional, you're not. Like the power imbalance is massive, and it can be a very threatening experience depending on who does it. But we have this idea that counselling is good, and it may not necessarily be good. It may make things worse, depending on how it's done. The idea that in society that they are there to help means that they're going to make things better. And then if we don't get better and things don't change, what's wrong with us? I've been going to counselling for 6 weeks and I'm still got these, concerns. Like, what's wrong with me? Do you know what I mean? Then we have a sense of failure. It's such a sensitive process, I think, to navigate. Mm.